Some crops transcend the garden as culinary superstars renowned worldwide.
Such is the case with jalapenos, easily the most grown and consumed of the hot peppers.
This is a medium-sized chili with medium-sized heat, relatively. For wimps like me, jalapenos are at the top of the Scoville scale for what I can tolerate.
Because of this, though, they're my absolute favorite pepper to grow.
That and they're also one of the most prolific. Originally cultivated and used by ancient Aztecs, jalapenos are the same species as regular bell peppers, Capsicum annum, and their care is very similar with some nuances, of course.
So today, let's look at that nuance and dive into the world of planting jalapenos. When, where, and how. This is one pepper you want to be growing this season. Enjoy.
No doubt we've got a million choices when it comes to growing peppers. Color, size, flavor, sweetness all play a factor.
But there's only one jalapeno, and it certainly delivers on all fronts.
The benefits for growing these green beauties are unmatched flavor, high yield for relatively low effort, space-friendly, and generally pest-free.
Planting them is pretty easy and straightforward, though, and we really only have 4 things to consider to be successful with jalapenos: timing, location, the soil, and of course, depth and spacing. Before we get planting, though, let's look at that timing first.
While you can start your own jalapenos from seed, like all pepper varieties, they're rarely seeded straight into the garden. Jalapenos are without question a tropical plant. In zones 9 or lower, they most definitely have to be started early indoors if we want a chance to be successful with them. They are one of the quicker pepper varieties to reach maturity, especially for the hots, but they still require 60 plus days of summer weather to produce the fruit. It's generally considered ideal to start your peppers early indoors, about 8 to 10, sometimes even 12 weeks before your last spring frost date. It's also perfectly fine to buy your jalapeno pepper starts at the store in the early spring. They're relatively inexpensive, pre-hardened off, and they'll be ready for planting as they'll be the same age as if you started them yourself.
What this means is our jalapenos should be at least 2 to 3 months old before we plant them out in the garden. And that event, which is where we're at today, also has its own specific timing. Let me explain.
For jalapenos, the ground should be at least 65 degrees Fahrenheit before we think of planting them outside. This usually doesn't occur until at least 1 to 2 weeks after that last spring frost. Warmer climates will have some leniency with these planting windows, but cooler zones with a defined summer and winter really need to follow this timeline if you hope to be harvesting jalapenos.
Okay, we know the when, now let's focus on the where, which for me is somewhere in the middle of this jungle.
My go-to pepper beds along the east fence were set aside to go dormant this past season. While the weeds and blackberry bushes have gotten out of hand, the beds are in there somewhere. I just have to go and find them.
While I annihilate the area to bring back some semblance of order, let's talk about the best locations to grow your jalapenos.
Like all peppers, jalapenos are a tropical full sun crop. They require 8+ hours a day of direct sunlight during the warm summer months. Shady spots are simply out of the question. As well, even though they are aggressive growers and by no means a shrinking violet, jalapeno plants enjoy the benefit of a solid backdrop. Eliminating severe winds and radiating some of that heat back towards the plants is what grows massive jalapenos. East side and south facing for those of you in the northern hemisphere, and the opposite for you guys growing under the equator. Jalapenos can most definitely be planted straight into the ground, but for me here in Zone 9, I've had far more success with raised beds and container setups.
Oh man, these beds are definitely going to take more than a day to get through. It's going to be totally worth it though, because they have all the qualities that we just talked about to grow the best peppers.
For the last 12 years or so, this is the spot where I've grown the most peppers. Bells, poblanos, hots, you name it. But it's been a while since I've gone full out with the jalapenos. The greenhouse has always been home to more than a few, but it'll be nice to get them going outside again and let them stretch their legs. I'm not going to go too crazy though. I'm only going to be planting 16 in total. I got 2 8-foot beds once I find them, so that'll be 8 plants per. You'll notice that some of the jalapeno seedlings have been pruned and some have not. This is for an experiment on pepper pruning that I'm doing later on this summer. They all get planted the same way, and it won't affect any of the tips that we're talking about here today. Planting is planting, and it's all good.
Okay, we've punched through and we've finally reached the first bed. We're on the cusp of planting. But before we get there, let me clean the rest of this up. And while I do, let's talk about that third parameter for planting your jalapenos for success, the soil.
The soil in your garden can make or break any crop, and jalapeno pepper plants are no different. They need at least a foot of depth, and they'll use every inch you can give them. The soil itself should be loose, rich, loamy, or sandy loam, but packed with organic matter, and of course drain well. Dirt that is dense, cold, soggy, and compact will essentially kill these plants. Heavy clay-type soils don't work with peppers, which is probably why most people grow them in raised beds or containers. If you have an older established raised bed for your jalapenos, it may be wise to augment their plantings with a fresh potting mix to allow their roots easier access to a faster start.
Which is where we're at today. I have no doubt that the soil in these beds is top-notch, rich, and ready to go. However, a little bit of fresh potting mix is going to give these guys a much easier start at outdoor life.
A simple concoction of 1/2 aged compost, 1/2 soaked coconut fiber, and a sprinkling of perlite. Essentially, a homemade potting mix. Suitable for pots and containers, but also great for planting up young pepper plants. The perlite is for aeration and drainage, purely to keep those young developing roots happy. This isn't by any means a necessary step, and if you soak the area before planting and you've got good soil to begin with, likely you'll be fine. What this does though is to create an area around the young seedling with a substrate that's similar to the one it's already growing in. An easy transition that allows the roots to absolutely explode with new growth without having to acclimatize to new surroundings. It's handy for the delicate leafy crops like lettuce and even melon plugs, but even vigorous crops like peppers can certainly benefit from it.
And with that, we can finally plant and take on the last tip for getting our jalapenos into the ground, and that's depth and spacing.
Jalapenos, seedlings, and starters like all peppers, should be planted at least a little bit deeper than their current active root collar. They aren't as aggressive with it as tomatoes are, but they do send out adventitious roots from the stem where it comes in contact with moist soil. Extra roots at this time means the young pepper plants get established faster, thus they grow faster. I like to plant mine right up to the first leaf node. Nothing too crazy, but definitely deeper than the average crop that's not named a tomato.
For spacing, jalapenos are large plants with large canopies and large root systems. Eventually.
24 inches between each plant is recommended for the large pepper varieties, but jalapenos can get away with a little bit less. 14 to 18 inches between each plant is fine, but don't go any tighter than that. In fact, I originally planned for 8 jalapeno plants per bed, but I'm going to dial it back to 7. I get the benefits of square foot gardening and all that jazz, but sometimes it's just not the best for certain plants. And now would be a perfect time to talk about containers. Same rules apply for the soil, depth, and even the spacing. 1 plant per pot, using the 5 or 7 gallon size. Everything else stays the same, easy peasy. Peppers in containers are kind of underrated, much less popular than tomatoes for sure. Jalapenos are certainly a variety that could change that. Okay, perfect depth and perfect spacing. The only thing left to do now is to mulch and water. The more we can do to create an optimal environment around the seedlings or plugs, the better and faster they'll grow. All tucked in and all nice and moist, our jalapenos are good to go. Hold off on the first feeding for about 2 to 3 more weeks. Let those young plants get their root systems established first. Other than that, our work is pretty much done here.
Pretty simple stuff, but necessary if you want to get those epic levels of jalapeno pepper production. Still, that was a lot of information all at once. Let's go ahead and recap the main points to make sure that they all stick.
Jalapenos are by no means a hard crop to be successful with. But that success is dictated by the start they get right at planting time. Even big and healthy seedlings and starts can produce a disappointing outcome in the end if they're not given the right care when planting out in the garden. Jalapenos are highly prolific, smallish type peppers with big time harvests.
Provided we start them off right. Hopefully, with what we covered here today, we set you up for some monster jalapenos later on this season. As always, guys, happy growing, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks so much for stopping by and doing some gardening with me. Now more than ever, there's a huge benefit to growing our own food at home. Please consider subscribing and checking out this playlist here. Also, sign up for my free courses using the link on the screen as we dive even deeper into the world of backyard vegetable gardening.